You're it. I'm Amanda Malcolm, and you're listening to You're It, Girl, a podcast focused on you and what propels you, because that past, it does not define you. Your time is now, and you're it, girl. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to You're It, Girl. I'm Amanda Malcolm, a host of the show. Thank you to all of you that have been listening. We are on now episode 2 of the second season, so very exciting. And today, I have a guest that is a very dear friend of mine. I actually married her years ago when I was in the hospitality industry, and her name is Max Wagner, and she is going to talk about parental alienation syndrome today. Hi, Max. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. And Amanda, I can't say enough how I appreciate the trust that you've put into me to actually invite me onto your podcast. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I know we've had a lot of deep conversations in the past, so I'm not going to say excited about you sharing this topic today, but I think it is a topic, as we've discussed, that is not something that is really talked about, but is something that a lot of us have dealt with or know somebody that has dealt with this. So just first share a little bit just about you and just tell us a little bit about Max.
Okay. So I've been a resident of Arizona since 2002. I love it here. Obviously, I've become remarried. And my husband is wonderful.
He's the best.
He's been I look at him as my guardian angel, honestly, just a great guy. And he's been through the journey with me. And I have had 2 careers throughout my life. One, I was a redesign, not expert, but I did interior redesign. And then I went into business brokerage for the last 10 years or so. So that's my story. And I wanted to mention something very, to kind of clear the air, if you're okay with that, to start with, and for the audience that are talking or that are listening. Yes. I am not an expert in this. I am not a psychologist. I'm just here to share my story. I'm here to maybe help some people along the way. I'm definitely not here as a victim. And so I just want people to also know that some of the things, these are all my beliefs, okay? And some of the things that have worked for me and that I believe in may not work for somebody else out there. So I want to clarify that.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that before we get into this. So speaking of the topic, so you've had a personal experience with parental alienation syndrome since 2009.
Right.
So what brought you to this point today to coming on You're It, Girl and sharing about it?
So honestly, I think it was a God thing.
Yeah.
About 6 months ago, for whatever reason, Amanda, I don't know, people started coming around me that were all kind of involved in this in some way, shape, or form. And I'm an open book. I talk about it with people. And I remember God saying to me, okay, it's time. Time for what? No, it's time for you to share it, share your story and share it to the world. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. Well, God's funny sense of humor, of course, he keeps sending me more people. And finally I said, okay, all right, it's time I'm going to do this. And the first time I shared it with a group of about 40 women. And after my speech, about 4 or 5 women came up to me and told me that they had never heard of this. And a couple of them were involved in it and didn't know what it was. So it really made me realize, okay, I need to talk about this.
Yeah. So when you spoke to that group of women, the first thing, I was there for that speech. So the first thing that you did when you explained to us is you kind of described what this was. So what is parental alienation?
Okay. So there's lots of definitions out there, believe it or not. I have my own personal definition, but I Googled it because I wanted people that had never heard of this syndrome, and I guarantee there's a lot out there. And I picked up a definition, and if you're okay with it, I just want to read from
please.
One of the simplest definitions that I found out there. So parental alienation syndrome is the act of one parent deliberately undermining the relationship between the children and the other parent to the point of creating a hostile relationship and thus alienation from the children from the other parent. This is a form of serious psychological abuse that is internal, so much more difficult to treat, unlike physical abuse where the scars and wounds are on the outside. Parental alienation syndrome is so deep inside that unlocking the key to it may take years of treatment and unconditional love. So I think, that part is really important to at least understand what we're talking about.
Certainly. So share, I know that you have a personal experience with this. So part of this is your personal journey. So feel free to share with listeners with as much or as little as you wish to divulge, but how did this even come to be in your life? And then how did you discover that this was happening? Just tell us a little bit about that journey.
Okay. So I will tell my story. I'm going to do a Reader's Digest version because honestly, Amanda, I could talk about this for weeks. I do have some goals here as to what I want to obtain. I want to, my goal is if I can just educate one person and save one family and help people through this, then I've done my job. So I'm here to give back, and share my experience, strength, and hope. So I also wanted to just mention that parental alienation syndrome is often not 100%, but most of the time connected with personality disorders. One of the parents are involved in that and suffers from that in some way, shape, or form.
Be it, and we talked a little bit about this, but be it narcissistic or borderline personality disorder, things like that.
Or sociopaths or psychopaths or bipolar disorder. And we know how those all are, right? They're all really muddy and they're, they're not black and white. So you never really truly know what you're dealing with.
Right.
So I guess talking about my story, I grew up in a narcissistic household. I did not know that. It was very dysfunctional. And as a result, I saw the world just as what I thought the world was. I saw everyone as really trying to become a great person with values and morals and integrity and all of that. And I also was very quiet. I didn't have self-esteem. I didn't have a lot of self-respect. I was very introverted, I guess you could say. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have wants and needs. I didn't even know what those were. Yeah. I didn't even know what a gut was. Okay. So I really believe that because of my family of origin and the way I grew up, that I was primed and prepped to be chosen by somebody possibly with some type of personality disorder.
Sure.
And
makes sense psychologically, yeah.
So that's kind of how it started. So I will tell you, in 2008, I was married for 21 years. I have 2 children, and both in their teens at that time. And, life is so funny sometimes because on a very sunny day in August, my ex-husband had disclosed some horrible, different types of addictions. And
that you didn't know about.
That I didn't know about. But here's the irony of it all, Amanda. About a month prior to that, I remember driving down the 101 freeway past Scottsdale Road, and I was having a conversation with God. And I was thanking God for giving me such a wonderful life with a wonderful husband, with a beautiful home, with wonderful kids. And I was, that euphoric feeling you have of, I'm so happy and I'm so blessed. And then boom, like a month and a half later, my whole world turned upside down.
Yeah.
So, thinking back, yeah, there were many red flags that I missed. I didn't know what a red flag was or what it looked like. On that day, my world had completely turned upside down because the reality of what I thought it was and what I believed it was like gone forever. And I actually ended up protecting those secrets from him for a torturous 18 months, which was not easy. Yeah. We were living together and, still, and it was very painful.
I imagine.
Yeah. So, so I guess at that point in time, I asked myself two questions. Number one, how did I get here? And most importantly, what do I need to do in order to never be here again?
Yeah.
And that set me on the most introspective discovery journey I could have ever imagined. I took action. My children at that time started really distancing themselves from me.
Did you, at this time, you took action did you go through a divorce? What was that?
We were not divorced, but between 2008 and like 2010, those were the real tumultuous years.
You were still together.
We were still together until March of 2010. So it was a year and a half. Yeah, it was a good year and a half. And so I started noticing that my children were kind of distancing themselves from me. And I didn't know why. There were really no answers. And so my journey took two parts. One of the parts was I felt like I needed to figure out who I was. And number two was I needed to figure out what was going on with my children because something was wrong. They weren't responding to my questions. They weren't answering anything. And so looking back, I felt like I was a really good mother. I mean, I was raising my kids. My husband was gone all the time. He traveled for business. And I was very involved in everything that they did. And we would go on trips and, totally, totally connected. And so was I a perfect mother? No, I didn't. I had my fair share of mistakes that I made. But as a rule of thumb, they were my life. So the next 2 years set that tone for me. And oh boy, I was in for Mr. Toad's wild ride, I'll tell you. I went through about 5 psychiatrists. There's so much more. 5 psychiatrists, a couple of psychiatrists, or 5 psychologists, a couple of psychiatrists, a couple of life coaches, 2 hypnotherapists, a chakra healer, a people whisperer. That was an interesting one. I became like a junkie.
Yeah.
Okay. Of
self-healing. Yeah.
I took, weekend courses of how to, find yourself.
Well, because once this kind of stuff happens, it literally hits you like a ton of bricks. And then you
Exactly.
realize you're like, oh my gosh.
Right.
I have to, in order to get out of this, I have to heal from it. So it does require this type of introspection. And not every psychologist is the same. Not every different healing modality resonates with everybody. So sometimes it takes some time to find that right fit so where you can have a breakthrough. Anyway, continue.
Interesting that you say that because 2 things I want to share is number one, in my experience, psychologists do not really have the expertise in this. It takes years. And I find that people that
in parental alienation syndrome.
Exactly. In parental
we talked a little bit about this because
yes.
because a lot of them don't have a personal experience
right.
with it.
Right. And they don't have
and it's a
long
term. It's a very long, deeply ingrained thing with lots of different
tentacles, right?
Yes. Yes.
So true.
Yes.
And so here's the interesting part, Amanda, is one of the things I did was I joined a group. This was this didn't cost me any money. Okay. Everything else, I spent thousands of dollars on everything else that I did. And I have no regrets because I did learn bits and pieces from them. But the one thing that taught me the most was free. And it was, believe it or not, it was called Coda Anonymous. So it's run like a 12-step program.
Yeah.
And it's about codependence. Well, we're all codependent, right? I just happen to be a very extreme case.
I'm codependent too.
Yeah. I'm
in ACA right now. It's been great. Actually, It's very eye-opening.
Yeah. So my experience there, and just, I want to share the journey because I look back on it and I have a totally different thought process about it. At first, walking to that first meeting, well, you got the drug addicts and you've got the alcoholics and you've got the homeless people. That's who goes to these meetings. No, you are in the back of these dark rooms where everything is anonymous, everything is confidential. And guess what? You have very successful businessmen, you have doctors, you have lawyers, you have politicians. In fact, I think, honestly, in one of the rooms, I saw one of my doctors that performed surgery on me one time. And this is where you find out about life. And this is where people dig deep and the heart-wrenching stories. And this is where the true heroes are.
Yeah.
In
these anonymous rooms.
Right. The truth and what life is all about. And I'll never forget this one time. And there's usually about 50 people in these rooms, okay? This one time, the room was pretty much packed and somebody shared their story. And I kid you not, Amanda, not one person had a dry eye after our session had ended. And I literally walked out of there and I was, just for the record, these were, the beginnings of this were dark, very dark days for me. And I walked out of that meeting and I said to myself, my life is perfect. I have no issues. I have no problems. So it really gives you some perspective of what goes on in the world.
So when did you, after CODA and after the psychologist and some of these different modalities, when did the parental alienation, when was that something that you recognized was happening?
Good question. Okay, so I'm going to take you to the next 2 years. I went through some very, very dark days, because you have to remember back in 2008, 2009, people didn't know about this. People weren't getting alienated from our kids. As a matter of fact, my children had many friends in high school and many of their parents were getting divorced, right? And they had some difficult times and they went through some gut-wrenching experiences. But for some reason, they always seemed to find their way back. I was the only one that wasn't happening to. So I felt like I was the only person in the world that was
isolating,
was dealing with this, right? Yeah. So what I also discovered, which was very interesting, is friends, especially that I knew, I would kind of confide in them about what was happening with me and my children. And I could actually see their brain working behind their face, saying to themselves, yeah, well, I like Max. I think she's a really nice person, but whose children would not want to have anything to do with their mother? Surely she did something horrific to her children, because nobody does that. And that caused me to, have friends that distance themselves and family members and all that. So the next 2 years were very, very difficult. And as the years went on, I just honestly prayed a lot. So to answer your question, I was on Facebook, not one of my favorite platforms, but I was there and I saw something come across my feed.
What year was this?
Because I'm trying to think. 2019.
Oh, okay. So we had already known each other. I remember we would talk about a lot of this stuff because I met you 2013. 2013. Okay.
Yeah. So you saw,
I remember a lot of these stories. We stayed friends. So after Max and Bill got married, then we we always really kind of hit it off. So we
Right.
stayed friends through all of those years after I had
Right.
Kennedy. And so we would talk about a lot of this stuff. I would talk
poor
about my
thing.
mom. No, it was actually really,
I confided
it was
in you so
probably
much.
really healthy for both of our perspective
Yeah,
to
we
be
talked
able to
about it
have
lots,
someone
too.
to share, and you knew that it wasn't going to go anywhere. And they were really deep topics. Okay, so that evolved over the course of 2013 to 2019.
So all of a sudden I'm looking at Facebook and I see this feed come on my phone, and I read it, and it's the letters are PASG, and it stands for Parental Alienation Study Group. And I'm like, this is interesting. So I started to do some research, and lo and behold, to me, they were describing my life story. And I was like, oh, this is too weird. This is too weird. So I went down the rabbit holes, and I reached out to someone who ended up being a pioneer and a very well-known author in this parental alienation syndrome sector. She invited me to, and I'm going to emphasize this, okay, to their third international convention in Philadelphia.
Wow.
Okay. International, to go. And next thing I know, I'm on a plane.
I remember this.
To Philadelphia with my husband's blessing that I finally get some answers here somewhere, right? So do you want to take a guess at how many people were there, attended?
I don't even know.
Okay.
I think you told me, but
international, 200 people.
That's it?
200
For international.
people. For international. Not only that, 60 of the international people were psychologists, psychiatrists,
trying
authors,
to learn more about it,
pioneers.
So help. Yeah.
There were a few speakers. There were 12 of us only that were targeted parents, and I'll get to that in a minute. And I learned so much there. It was 6 grueling days of, just lectures and learning about the syndrome. I really connected with
how amazing to have that all in one place.
A lot of people, right? All in one place. And so what I learned so many things back then that blew my mind. For example, at that time, there were 22 million parents in this country that were alienated from their children that they knew about. That's the tip of the iceberg back then. And nobody was talking about it because I have my own little sayings for things. And I call this FEGS, which means fear of judgment, embarrassment, guilt, and shame. People don't talk about it.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, because it feels like you said, you as a parent, people are thinking to themselves, well, what is wrong with her that her kids don't want to associate with her?
Right.
Like that.
What did she do that's so terrible?
That does cause shame and guilt, and then a lot of evaluation and going, well, there's nothing that I actually did. Why is this actually happening? And then to talk to other moms about it, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, and there were times where, honestly, Amanda, when I was in my dark days, where I would sit there and think to myself, is it possible that I did something just terrible to my kids and that I don't remember what I did? I mean, you really start
I remember us having these conversations.
Yes, you really start to question who you are and what has transpired in your life. I mean, all these mind tricks that you play on yourself. So anyways, at that convention, I had noticed some of the, okay, so let me back up a little bit. Parental alienation has many pieces of the puzzle, okay? There are what's called the alienating parent. That is the parent that does the damage and is kind of reprogramming and brainwashing the children through lies and all different types of things to change their belief system and literally reprogram them. And then there's...
What would be an example of that?
An example might be, your mother never loves you, doesn't love you. She's always told me that she does not love you. And they say it over and over again. So the belief system of your children become, my mother doesn't love me. And they do this over years sometimes.
Well, I think we'd shared about this. This is a good example. So I have a friend that deals with this. And for years, her ex has been planning all the doctor's appointments. And so to make it easier, just because it's kind of always a thing, she just kind of let him do it. And now it has come up that the daughter thinks that the mom doesn't care about her because the mom doesn't go to her doctor's appointments. And the dad has been drilling it for years that, oh, your mom doesn't care about you. She doesn't even come to your doctor's appointments. But he refuses to let the mom book any other appointment. So it's a good example of what that does. And now the child is 12 or 11. And so she, like, this has come up. She's actually said to her mom, well, you don't even care because you don't come to my doctor's appointments.
And that becomes their belief system.
She believes it strongly.
That becomes their truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what's really, really hard. So you have the alienating parent, and then you have the targeted parent. That's the parent that they are attacking. And again, my belief that the alienator is always wearing some type of a mask that they don't want anyone to know who they truly are. And the targeted parent, I believe a lot of times, is the one person in the whole world that knows who they are. And so they don't want anybody else to find that out. And so they need to destroy the targeted parent and take what is his or her, it's a lot of men too, what their prize, love is in their whole world.
Which would be their children.
Which would be their children, who never know who they really are. They think they're Disneyland mom or Disneyland dad. So there's also the empaths, which is a lot of targeted parents are that way. They're the ones that care about people and want to help people. And so they're picked, they're groomed, they're picked for it. And so those are kind of the players here in this syndrome, if you will. And so getting back to the convention, I noticed that there were some women and men, really, that had been dealing with parental alienation for 20 and 25 years. And Amanda, I have to tell you, these people looked like Holocaust survivors. They walked around crying all the time. And it was the saddest thing to me. And I said to myself, I am not going to turn into one of those people. I am just not going to do it. I can't let this take my life away from me. And so that was a very interesting experience, going there and learning what I did and making those connections.
So how did you take charge of it?
Well, that's a good question. I worked on me, and I worked on realizing that it's not an exact science, that it's a deeply rooted syndrome that takes a lot of, time to go through. And I was really on my journey to take my power back. That's really what it's all about, to learn who I am and to take my power back. But more importantly, that I have no control. There's nothing I can do, nothing I can change. But what I can do is I can work towards becoming what I call the lighthouse on the hill, the bright and shiny lighthouse on the hill. So when your children come back to you, and I do believe they will, that you will be there because they are going to need you. They are going to desperately need you at that point in time.
Well, and I know, because we've had many conversations about your kids, and there have been situations recently where you've been that lighthouse on the hill because your daughter has sort of come back in the ways that she's been able to slowly. Mm-hmm. And with what you've learned, you've been able to create some connections with her. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've learned so much. I've learned that, and I want to share this with targeted parents. This is so important. When your children start to separate from you, they're not going to be very nice, and they don't treat you with respect. And they oftentimes are very mean to you. I mean, a child saying, I hate you and I never want to see you and you're this horrible person is very common. And to deal with all of that rejection
It's a lot.
is a lot, right? But here's what parents need to understand. Again, this is my belief system, but I do have my own personal proof to this as well, that the pain and the agony that you go through as a targeted parent, and I'm not undermining this in any way, shape, or form, but your children are the ones that are put into this horrendous, deceitful web. And they are the ones that are tortured, I would say 1,000,000 times worse than you are. And they have no way out. They are in a no-win situation. A lot of times these children, they lose their childhoods. They lose their memories of the good times you've had. They've been reprogrammed. So they don't really understand and they don't know what's happening to them. All they know is that they have a new belief system. And so to just really try and respond to these things in love, because that's really what they need. And your children are in there. They're just really deep in there.
And I remember you saying that to me.
They are, Amanda. Yeah. I'm telling you.
I remember when you'd have like a little glimpse. You're like, I saw her. I know that she's there.
That's it. The crazy thing about it is I have experienced in both of my children where you are having a conversation with them and at first they are very guarded. And when they are when you create an environment where they're very comfortable and they feel safe, you can watch the brainwashing come literally fall off and they are there. They are in there. And I want targeted parents to understand who your children treat you as and who they show up as in front of you. That's not who they are. That's what they've learned from the alienator. So really important point there.
What are some of the things that you did initially that seemed to work? One, for yourself, and then two, that you noticed really helped your kids to let their guard down a little bit. Was there anything that stood out?
That's a really good question because
I know this has taken a lot of time.
No. That's okay.
No, not this, not us talking. I know that subject has taken a lot of time.
Meaning to get to where I'm at?
Yes.
Yeah. And I've learned so much through my journey. It's just amazing. I could sit here with you for 2 weeks.
I know. I could too.
All I can tell you is that I went through, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I want targeted parents. I know, I'm
pulling you away from your...
No, that's okay. I want them to understand how I got to where I'm at. I went through a stage where I'm sure every targeted parent goes through, where you are being alienated. Your children want nothing to do with you, but you are so afraid to let go of that because you don't want your children to think that you don't care about them and that you stop reaching out to them, that it becomes obsessive, okay? And you're so afraid to let go of that, and you get in this cycle that is really unhealthy.
Well, because then you reach out and then they don't respond or they say something mean and then you feel worse and you're trying. I remember this.
You remember that?
Yeah,
right?
I absolutely do.
And
my siblings have done this with my dad.
There you go. Yeah. And I did go through the time where it would be 2 words that I would hear from my daughter for 6 months, but after 2 weeks of hearing those 2 words, she controlled my life. I was so happy and I lived with those 2 words. I know it sounds crazy, but that controlled me. How they responded led my life. And I realized I can't do this any longer. And I was on, so many so many rabbit holes and just 24/7 in it. And I learned that you need to really step back and you need to create your own life and you need to live your own life. Getting back to the convention, those people didn't
let go of the control
and realize that your children know they love you. They know it deep down inside, and that's all that matters. So I stepped back and I curtailed my frenzy, if you will, of, oh my gosh, I have to, and the guilt if I didn't reach out. And I learned that you let them take the lead, slow and steady, short and sweet. And I learned something really important, that, you can reach out with letters, you can reach out with emails, you can reach out with voicemails, but voicemails are going to trigger something positive in them, their mother's voice or their father's voice. Because I believe and I understand that children have an innate desire to stay connected with their parents. They just do. It's just part of being human, I think. And that connects them easier, I think, if that makes any sense. I know I'm going all over the board
No,
here.
you're not actually. No, this is actually it's on the perfect trajectory. Yeah.
So it caused me to pause and take a step back and really get out of the frenzy that I was in.
Yeah.
And, not be angry, forgiveness is a big part of it. Big part of it. I learned forgiveness. If you can't forgive and you can't let go of what you can't control, then the journey's going to be much harder for you, and the anger and all of that is just, it's gone. I don't have it. It's taken me a long time to get here.
So once you truly let go of all of that, what happened?
A big portion of it is that I had things that I had to deal with my own mother. And the 2 years during COVID when my mother came, and I had work to do. I had more work to do. And I believe that my daughter had more work to do. And my mother died in January of 22. And my husband said to me, God love this man. He said, honey, when your mother passes away, you are going to shoot for the stars. And I kind of looked at him like, yeah, right. It's so true. I just catapulted forward and I learned so many things at that point, and I was really growing and I was really changing. And I'm going to backtrack. A year before my mother passed away, I sent my daughter a letter that was probably not in, how do I want to say this? There's certain things that people believe to be true in parental alienation. And I took some of that as truth, and some of it I took on as there's so much mud there that, sometimes you can kind of tweak it a little bit for yourself. And I wrote her this letter that I would have never done before. And it didn't really go by the rules that I believed in. I'm kind of a rule breaker sometimes. And part of me still believes that some of that internalized in her. Meanwhile, she was going through her own things. And I decided to, for the first time, send my daughter a gift basket for her birthday. And it was big. And I remember I had so much fun with it. And I put in a lot of really special things for her, just kind of memories of good times that we had and things that would resonate with her. And the other thing I want to say is every time that I would reach out to my children, I had no expectations. You just send it out to the world and you can't look back and you can't think about it. And I sent that out to her with no expectations. And she came back to me with the fact that she wants to start having psychology sessions with me. And I was shocked, absolutely shocked.
I remember that day.
Yeah. And she told me,
about that. I remember how happy you were.
Oh my gosh. And she apparently, through what I know of her journey, she had more work to do before we came back together at our perfect timing together. So, so we started having psychology sessions with the psychologist of her choice on Zoom. And that started in August of 22. And it's been an incredible journey. Here's the funny part though, Amanda, is that I have so many questions. I mean, I was in the black abyss, as any targeted parent would tell you. We know nothing. So we make up these crazy thoughts and ideas of what has really happened, right? So I had spent so much time doing that and really wanting answers. I wanted to know this. I wanted to know that. And the funny part about it is I don't care. I have very few answers. And whether I have any more answers or ever get to know anything else, I'm okay with it because it's going to come from my daughter when she's ready. Or if she's never ready, that's okay because we have an amazing relationship. I got to know her and I'm getting to know her for the first time ever in my life. So many wonderful surprises have come. I've been actually taking copious notes and of every contact that we've had. And my goal is that we're going to write a book together. My daughter doesn't know that. I haven't shared any of this with her. And my children don't know any of this. So I'm really taking a lot of chances here talking about this, but I'm doing this for the world and it's meant to be the way it's going to be. But it's, it's been a really amazing journey.
It certainly has. I know I kind of took you off on some tangents.
No.
I know there was some key things that you wanted to hit. So is there anything that by asking a question, took you off of a topic that you do feel like you definitely want to hit home? Because there were some major highlights. I think the most impactful thing that I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, I mean, truly letting go of the control.
Let go.
And just letting your daughter lead the way and being comfortable and confident enough to be able to sit back and accept whatever it was that she was willing to give was in your mind a beautiful step, even if it was a small step forward in a positive direction. And I can even see just the ease in which you spoke about it. And it was at that, I remember all of this, like as it's transpired over the years. And as soon as that happened, it was almost as if all the things kind of just slowly started coming back in.
Coming together, the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And you know what's so funny is I prayed about this for years. I prayed to God about it and it wasn't the right time. And maybe well, clearly now looking back, it wasn't the right time for either one of us. She had to go through stuff that she had to go through, and I had to go through stuff that I had to go through. And nothing was going to change the timing of this. And so, the old let go and let God, because that is so true.
How would you encourage those that are in this situation? This isn't on your question list. So if you need if you need a moment to think about it, but I'm just curious, how do you encourage those that are in this situation to be able to not be wrapped up in because I'm sure this is a thing as a parent, the lost time, the moments that because
you missed
of the alienation, the moments that you missed, and because of the things that you don't know that happened or were going on in her life because they were unwilling to share. How do you encourage someone to let those things go?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So there is a thought about it that alienated parents that get reconnected with their children, and I love this terminology, their relationship looks like Swiss cheese because it has many, many holes in it that will never be filled. But the past is the past. And I have a solid, I'm creating a solid foundation with my daughter that is full of trust and honesty and, and everything good. And you go forward and the past really doesn't matter. They'll find out it doesn't really matter what happened or what didn't happen or what we created in our crazy brain that we thought happened.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get caught up in that because 99% of the time it's not true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've learned that through my reconnection. What I thought was happening and what she thought and what she felt, it never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would encourage those to targeted people to never, ever give up hope, ever. There have been studies done. There was one, don't quote me on this, but there was one recently done in, I believe it was the UK, and 45 children who were alienated from their parents, 95% of them came back and had relationships with their parents. It will happen.
It's encouraging.
Yes,
Yeah.
Most of the time, there's always going to be those few, but I believe that. And there's more and more people waking up. There's more kids waking up. There's channels out there. There's YouTubes on children, and I could give you that information. There's books to read, more so than when I was dealing with this in 2008 and 2009. There was not really anything. I did end up meeting one girl at the convention who woke up and she wrote a book, and I love it. It's so raw and just amazing. And I kind of lost track of her, but she's on a great journey right now, married and has a child. And so, yeah, it's, never give up hope. And, I'm here to help. I'm in any way that I can, and to give back and to share my journey.
And if anybody does have any questions, how would you like them to be able to connect with you?
Ideally, because I'm kind of in this situation where my family doesn't know anything about this, if they want to reach out to you, Perfect. I'll give you the information and you can reach out to them. They can call me, they can, text me, they can email me, and I would love to have, a conversation with them. And I have just for the record, I have been successful in helping friends of mine with their children and saving them from this. Not because I'm a hero of any sort, but because I'm sharing my truth and my hope and helping to better our world, I guess.
Yes, you already are. Well, thank you for coming on today, Max.
Thank you for having me.
If anybody has any questions about this or you're experiencing anything like this, Max is an excellent resource. You can reach out to me. You know how to find me on Instagram, or you can send an email at youreitgirl.com. And Max, any words to sign off today?
Just don't lose hope. Forgive, and work on yourself. Understand how you got here. Because if you don't understand how you got here, then you're not going to be able to change anything.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on today. I know this was
You're welcome.
It took a lot of courage to come on today and share this. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. That's Your It Girl.